Richard, from some of the earlier questions that we've already asked, people might get the impression that the medieval Catholic Church was all bad, it was all evil, there was nothing redeeming about it. How would you respond to that?
Well, if people get that impression from me, let me just make it as clear as I can. I don't think that's true, okay? The medieval Roman Catholic Church was a huge thing with all kinds of different variations and different kinds of people in it. There are many firm, solid, and godly believers in the body of Christ from the beginning and to the end. And I think that's just something we're promised from God, that we will have good, well-intending Christians. The difficulty, of course, anytime you talk about any period of history of the church is that sometimes you just have to make generalizations. And if you're wanting to make a generalization that sort of sets you up for the next generalization, then you go one way or the other, which is what this lesson is about. But yeah, it's certainly true that there are certain pockets of Christians all over the medieval church, right up to the time of the Reformation. It's not as if the great theologians of the church of the past were all evil, or that they were all trying to deceive people, and that all of them were just trying to make the Bible say what they wanted it to say. I mean, we've already mentioned that there were certain sort of practical elements that almost made it necessary for them to substitute the teachings of the church for the teachings of the Bible. I mean, it's easy for us in our day to think that, well, why didn't they just let people read the Bible? Well, the answer to that is there were no Bibles to be read. And that's why they didn't do it. And when they did have Bibles to be read, they had to protect them because they had to keep them out from the public because they would be destroyed and that sort of thing. I mean, can you imagine today if we lived in this country or some other modern country and you only had one Bible in the church, would you pass it around? I don't think so, okay? What you do is you stand up in front maybe and read a little bit of it and hope that maybe somebody can memorize a phrase or two from it. And I think that's, if you want to put the best spin on it, that's what the medieval church was trying to do. They were, again, with the best spirit, the ones that were honest and honorable, they were trying to minister to people who just were locked out of the possibility of having Bibles in their hands. And that's really not very different from the early church. The early first century church also did not have a proliferation of Bibles. And you know why? No printing press, no movable type printing press. So here we are in the modern world where we can make books by the bazillions without even thinking about it for pennies, and we think that's the way it always has been. Many Christians I know have Bibles, multitudes of Bibles on their shelves. And of course we don't read them, we just look at them, but we have them. And so we can't even imagine a church that doesn't have the Bible all over it. It's an odd thing, it's an oddity in history for people to go to church with Bible in hand because people just didn't have it. And when you also have a constituency, a congregation that's uneducated, that can't understand the sorts of things that we talk about in church today. I mean, let's face it, even though many churches are very sort of low, we say dumbing down the gospel, they're still, by comparison, talking to people who are highly literate and highly educated if they're in the West. Now, that's not true everywhere in the world, but they are in the West. And so we had this sort of inability to connect to the realities of the medieval period, where magic was everywhere, where superstition was everywhere, and where the common folklore was everywhere, and that this was so prevalent among people that the church had to, in many respects, speak to that, and speak to it in ways that people that were wrapped up in that kind of folk religion could understand. So it's not entirely evil. But now that we're past those days, we've got to be careful not to make mistakes like they made back then. I think that's the critical thing.